So just today in the news, they were announcing that HP is closing the Boise site, which I don't know if you know, but like that's like HP finally burning down the garage. uh, so that I lived in Boise, and when I lived in Boise, I was told that that's how you say it. You say the word boy, and then you say the letter C, Boise. Anyway, because I would always say it wrong. um, and so I moved there because I went to work for HP. And HP was great. I mean, really, it's only now that I'm old and I'm retired that I really appreciate the quality of engineers that I got to work with, and just that the it's not even that it's the HP way. It's just the way they approach things, and then all the great stories I got to hear, you know. So that's part of the old HP way. Like I mean, you hear stories about when when the internet just first came out, and the stuff would literally they're crawling through the buildings, dragging RJ45 cables around, wiring up all the floors themselves, the employees. Not like, oh, we had someone come in and wire the building. No, you hear that, or just the stories about, like, so if there was a group of engineers that wanted to, and they're like, oh, well, we have an idea. They would literally just go buy the components right there in Boise. Go buy the circuits. They would be soldering stuff together. Anyway, I digress. But the old HP way, was great. Got to meet a lot of great engineers. I'll erase some of this. So yeah, but. So that's why I went out there. I moved out there. It was my first engineering job. Really, just the HP way was great out there in Boise, and Boise was interesting. I moved out there. Oh man, I'm moving to Boise. This little, I don't know. But then there was a lot of really cool people, man. A lot of neat people in Boise, and so when I lived there, I still played music. I busked. I would go downtown, and the reason I that started busking was because I would go downtown to Boise, and there would literally be, on any given night, really, in the summer, and on definitely on the weekends, you would see multiple players just on the corners playing. I remember even seeing a group of kids once that were playing. They actually had a guy. The first you never see this. They had a guy with a little snare drum. They were like high school kids, and I started talking to them, and they played the Beatles for me, and they're singing it and stuff. They were good. Anyway, so that's part of why I started busking, because you would just see people doing it. So then I said, well, I'm going to do it. I can play. So I got my guitar, and I would go down there and busk. So yeah, I would go down there, and I would actually, this was funny. So I would go downtown, and stand on the street corners and busk, and then for just like, a half hour, whatever, 40 minutes, an hour maybe, and then I would just go I had a fairly inexpensive acoustic guitar, so I would just go, toss it in the trunk of my car, and then I would go clubbing, and so I would be in the clubs, and I would run into people, and they would be like, were you out there playing? And I'd be like, yeah, I was. And so people would be all cool. Oh man, that's so cool, and you start talking to them. So it was a great way to meet people. But and then there was, like I said, that I remember where those kids were playing. It may still be there. It was the perfect spot, because it was like this tiled entryway it was actually into a parking garage, but it was underneath a club. So there was also like a staircase up to the club. And so it was all tiled. It was a little enclave. And so the acoustics were awesome. Like if you could get in there, it was just like it would ring. It was great. But that's like where the kids were. And I remember often I would go and there would be someone already there playing. But so yeah, good old Boise, Idaho. Like I said, I don't like to name names, but I met a really neat dude there that we used to go skiing. What is it? It's called Bogus Basin, and we used to go up there, and he had actually worked it. And so we get up there, and he's like, "No, don't. Stay real high when we get off the chairlift." And we go shooting down the ridge, and then we're just going. There's no trail. We're going tree bopping. And he's like, "Now, if we go down through here, you will come out on the trail, at the bottom. So I'm tree bopping on a snowboard, fucking bogus face, and he was telemarking. He was telemarking through the fucking trees, man. I remember just like, I was like, holy shit. Just, I don't know if you know what telemarking is, but it's like, it's down, I think I'm saying it right. It's downhill skiing on cross country skis. So you have to like push. I remember he was explaining to me, you have to like you have to take your feet and push the back of the ski. You can't turn them, like you can on the edges, like you can downhill skis. And he's doing that through the fucking trees. Anyway, I'm on a snowboard, so. But anyway, let's see. I wonder if they still, I wonder if there's still a lot of people out there. That was a long time ago. This was a long time ago. But let me see. So he's done some busking stuff. So if you ever busk, so it's funny. You just the best thing with busking is if you can get the people watching you to sing. So you ask them, they come over and they're like, well, what songs do you know? And then they'll start, and you're like, well, what do you know? What do you know? You guys know? And you can play the stupidest little 3-chord songs, like Wild Thing, and that kind of came from like when I would play in a restaurant. So when you play in a restaurant, you learn can't get people to sing, but you learn to see when people come in and sit down and stuff, and you rotate your set. So that's when you can start repeating songs. But for busking, I remember, I didn't really know this. I had never really busked much before. But if you can get them, because then you'll get them singing Wild Thing or whatever, and they'll just all be like, "Oh, that was so cool!" And it's like, I think Wild Thing is literally like 2 or 3 chords, But so anyway, that's some busking info. What else about Idaho's beautiful? There's the Ketchum and there's Sun Valley. And so there's a lot of history up there in Idaho. Oh, and then, there's the, so when you go up there, if you go to Idaho, you're going to learn about Ruby Ridge and you're going to learn about that stuff. But, so it's an interesting place. I found it to be pretty interesting. Like I said, Boise, it almost is funny because in Boise proper, it's like they're going out of their way to be, what's the word? Inclusive, is the word I'm using. So it's a good thing. They're very, but because they are aware of the stigma that they have, and so at least when I lived there, there were lots of things always happening in the parks and just at the zoo and just in general. They were very inclusive, very very neat. There was down in the city center, and I think we may do this where I live now too. But so this is back when I used to go do stuff like this. But they used to have a really neat thing with the fountain, and they would have live bands and people and go running around the fountain, and so that was cool. Very interesting place. So I'm glad I got to live there, because I would have never moved there had it not been for HP dragging me out there. But oh, and so this is the name of this. So it's so funny, So I listened to "What's Your Name" that's that song by what's the band? I forget. What's your name, little girl? But it starts off, 8 o'clock in Boise, Idaho, and I listened to that song my whole life, and I never heard that. I never just, I just went by me. And then when I live there, I live in Boise, and I'm listening to that song, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, did he just say Boise, Idaho? Yeah, he did. And so that was funny. And so that's why I named this. This is called 8 o'clock in Boise, Idaho.